Welcome back to the Reason Why podcast. This is where we learn what Christians believe, why they believe it, and to know if it's true. If you're just jumping in, or if you've been with us from the beginning, here's where we are so far in our chapter by chapter study of C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. Lewis has spent the first part of Mere Christianity doing something very intentional. He hasn't argued for Christianity yet. He hasn't even opened a Bible. He hasn't told us what to believe. Instead, he's asked a question. Is there a moral law that all humans seem to recognize? We've talked about how this law isn't instinct. It's not just social convention, and it doesn't disappear just because people disagree about it. And Lewis's claim is that this moral law points beyond us, not to a conclusion yet, but to a clue. The first chapter in book 2 is where Lewis begins sorting out the possible explanations of this clue. He calls them rivals. Before we get into Lewis's categories, I want to define an important term because even though he doesn't use this term directly, it's an idea that will come up over and over again. Worldview. A worldview is the framework you use to interpret reality. It's like a pair of glasses that you put on that filter everything you experience and think. It shapes what you believe, what you expect, and how you react, especially emotionally, to things. Most people don't consciously choose their worldview, at least not at first. They inherit it from their family, their society, and we absorb it from the culture we're exposed to and listen to. Some people can have more than one worldview, and most people won't even be able to pinpoint or label their worldview, but it's there nonetheless. That matters because if our worldview informs or in a way decides what we believe and our belief dictates our reactions to things, then we can't reasonably expect people with very different worldviews to respond the same way we do. For example, a Christian having a biblical or Christian worldview, grieving loss is processing it through the lens and ideas like purpose, resurrection, and hope. But a materialist atheist is processing that same loss through things like chance, finality, and meaninglessness. So whatever the worldview, it doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it does help us stay calm, charitable, and realistic with our expectations and conversations. If you don't account for worldview, you'll constantly be offended or at least distracted by reactions that actually make perfect sense within someone else's framework. One more vocabulary mini lesson before we get to the meat of this chapter. I do this regularly because it's important to define our terms. It's important to be on the same page with someone you're talking with or listening to, especially if you're learning from them. We have a lot of words that have been hijacked in the last decade, especially. And so we may use the same term, but we're not meaning the same things. So defining our terms, it's going to be a regular thing here. Lewis uses a word in this chapter that trips people up nowadays: liberal. So I want to be clear. He's not meaning the political liberalism of Democrats versus Republicans. Lewis is using liberal in the older philosophical sense, meaning open, generous, or charitable, particularly in evaluating ideas. And the surprising point he was making, he says Christians are actually more liberal than atheists. Why? Because, he says, Christianity claims that God exists. And if God exists, then it's reasonable to think that many religions may have glimpses of the truth, even if they don't have the whole picture. Atheism, on the other hand, must say that every single religion is completely wrong. Not partially, not mostly, but entirely mistaken. Now, that's not meant as an insult. It's just the logical implication of that worldview. Lewis compares this to math. Some answers can be closer to the truth than others, even if they're still wrong. Saying 2 plus 2 equals 5 is wrong, but it's closer than 2 plus 2 equals purple. Not all errors are equally distant from the truth. The main thing Lewis does in this chapter is lay out what he calls three major divisions that help us sort beliefs, not to mock them or rip them apart, but to have a better overall understanding. First division is belief itself. Is there God or is there no God? That's the big split between theism and atheism. Theism means belief in a God, and atheism is a rejection of a belief in God. The A at the beginning of atheism means without. So the second division comes in between those who do believe in some kind of God or gods, kind of. It asks, what is God like? Is God morally good? Does he care about good and evil? Does he take sides? Does he love and hates hatred? Or is God morally indifferent or even cruel? Many ancient religions believed in gods who were powerful but not good. They didn't expect justice from their gods, only to appease them. Some of these second types of religions have people believing that because God is indifferent, then someone dying of cancer matters just as much as the cancer dying because a surgeon cut it out of the person, saving the person's life. Now, this particular belief leads to the third division that Lewis gives us, and that is God the same thing as the universe or separate from it? This is where pantheism really comes in. Pantheism teaches that everything is God. The universe itself and everything in it is divine. So that is why a person matters just as much as a cancer or any and everything else. Now, that's very different from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which all say God created the universe, but God is not the universe. He is beyond and above it. Lewis's goal isn't to finish the argument here, but he is narrowing the field. Toward the end of the chapter, Lewis drops a striking line, and I'll paraphrase it. He says that Christianity is a fighting religion because it claims that God made the world good, but something's gone terribly wrong. And God insists that it be put right. So he doesn't mean that Christians were out there fighting people, but we are fighting in a cosmic and spiritual sense because we know that the world isn't supposed to be broken like it is. That leads to one of the biggest questions we all have asked or will ask at some point. If a good God made the world, why has it gone wrong? Lewis admits this question haunted him when he was an atheist. His argument went like, the universe is cruel and unjust, therefore there is no God. But eventually he stopped and asked a more dangerous question, dangerous to his own position. Why do I even have the concept of cruel or unjust in the first place? Lewis realized that calling the universe unjust assumed a standard of justice. You can't say a line is crooked unless you know what a straight line looks like. And you can't say the world is wrong unless you have some idea of how it ought to be. And that realization bothered him. Because if the universe were truly meaningless, if there were no design, no mind, no purpose, then where did this sense of justice and meaning come from? Lewis concluded that atheism was just too simple. It said there is no meaning. But if that were true, why did we ever discover the idea of meaning at all? He uses an effective analogy. Imagine creatures that live deep underwater or in pitch black caves. I asked my animal-loving son to find me one to show you guys. So this is the blind cavefish. Not a very creative name, but they've never seen light. They don't even have eyes. The word dark would have no meaning. It would mean absolutely nothing to them. Lewis's point is this. If justice were not real in any sense, we wouldn't even have the concept of injustice. The presence of moral outrage suggests that the universe is not nonsense, even if it's broken. Lewis's atheism said there is no God. In the last few decades, we've begun to encounter what has been termed new atheism. It's debated on when and where the term got started, but it goes further than traditional atheism and says belief in God is harmful. Lewis never made that move, and that difference matters because once belief is labeled immoral, typically communication stops. Lewis models something better: radical honesty with yourself, a willingness to follow truth even when it challenges what you want to be true. Book 2, Chapter 1 doesn't finish the argument, but it deepens it. Lewis isn't asking us to believe yet. He's asking us to think carefully about the options. And next time, we will narrow the options even more and begin to tackle the issue of evil. Thanks for being here. If you found this helpful or interesting, please share it with a friend. As always, you can find resources at my website, on Facebook and Instagram at Seek Truth Here. Guys, remember, the truth is worth knowing and sharing. God bless. I'll see you next time.